Hello, once again, and welcome back to the Chris Ott channel. I'm Chris Ott, and this is part 10 of this series on cause. Now, before I get into the subject for today, which is intuitions, I want to say something that I think if someone has been following this whole series, they'll understand finally what I'm saying. In the very first talk, I said that I realize that it would be legitimate for people who listen to me talk so much to say, hey, Chris, spit it out. What are you trying to say? Come on, say what it is, what's on your mind. Put it in 10 words, your thing. What is it? And that's understandable, and usually you can do that, like with a novel or something, or a conspiracy theory or something. But this is different. This is philosophy, and it's more complicated than that. So I said at the time, I couldn't do that initially, as much as I'd like to, because what I would say would either make no sense or be completely misunderstood without some kind of introduction to what it's about, because people don't understand the problems of philosophy, and so if you have a solution, they don't even know what you're talking about. I mean, what are you solving? I don't know what you're talking about. So, for instance, now I could say to a person who's listened to this whole series up to now, the previous 9 parts, I could say, I have a theory for the creation of the universe that replaces the reliance upon an external world, a theoretical external world, with a psychogenic cause. Okay? Now, imagine if I'd said that right off the bat. I'm not going to repeat myself. You get the point. Now, I just used the word psychogenic, and I had not defined that before. You could just look it up in any dictionary. It means having a psychological origin or cause, rather than a physical one, okay? Now, this doesn't mean that I deny the existence of material things, physical things. Of course there's physical things. This pen is physical, and it obeys the physical laws of physics. And it's solid, and everybody sees the same pen, and you can measure it, and it's quantitative, and it has it has weight, and it has density, and it has all the properties that we assign to a material object. There was a person, Berkeley, who I've mentioned in just about every talk series. He proposed an idea called idealism. Now, he never heard the word idealism before. He was later called that, but not in his lifetime. But he called himself an immaterialist. So he would have said, I don't believe that there is matter at all. Well, I do, okay? So the only thing is that I explain where it comes from, okay? How did it get here? How did it come to the universe? And that's what my theory accounts for, the material objects that are law governed, that we observe in our experiential world. That's all. Whereas materialism just leaves that as a sort of a unsolved bugaboo, whatever. Don't ask, don't say, we don't know where the laws come from, where the physical matter come from. Just don't ask. It just comes from out of random accidents somehow that we don't know. Okay, okay. Now, there's more to my theory than I have gone over in these talks, but I have in previous talks, and in the book that I will eventually finish, it will be very elaborately explained, and it's already explained pretty well in my first book, which I link to in various videos. It's online, it can be downloaded as a PDF. Okay, and it explains why we have some of our experiences private, some of our experiences shared. Like if two people come in the room and they see this pen, then we'll see the same pen. But we do that without the external world theory, and so we don't have a mind-body problem. Now, my theory can explain just about everything about the world that we experience. It can explain our moods and our opinions and our physical things and all the attributes of this pen, all physical objects, and why they act as they do in our experience. That is basically that the laws of nature govern experience. That the evolution of the world was an evolution of perceptual schemas, and those include the laws of physics. And so laws of physics are actually laws that govern perception. That's why they never fail to occur in your experience. To a kid who plays computer games, that'll make total sense. To an old person, I don't know. I have a little more trouble. Okay. However, when I first wrote my book, my short book, which is online, The Evolution of Perception and the Cosmology of Substance, I felt that I had a theory of everything, that I had explained everything that there is. And it says it right on the back of the book. This book explains everything, psychological, mathematics, anything that can potentially be experienced. But when I was working on the longer and more exhaustive rewrite of my book, which hasn't come out yet, which is late, I realized that there were things that I had not accounted for, that can't be accounted for by laws of perception or perceptual schemas that just organize your experience. Okay, and I want to talk about them. There's kind of two categories, but I'll talk about one today, the important one. We have certain intuitions, okay? Now I define an intuition, and it's very important that when listening or reading my work, you understand what I mean by an intuition and what I don't mean. Let me start by what I don't mean. In contemporary jargon, the word intuition has become associated with sort of the New Age and some alternative to or rational thought, okay? And it's or it's like quasi-rational. Somehow you arrive at knowledge, but you can't say how you did, and you're called an intuitive. And there's people that diagnose, your disease, what you should do for it. They call themselves intuitives, or there are people who predict the future or tell you your future, etc. Now, that's not what I mean. That's not what I'm talking about at all. That's the opposite of what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm going to say why it's the opposite. Okay, what I'm talking about is something that is very definite and everybody knows it. Everybody agrees on it. Okay, like 1 + 1 is 2. Okay, so whereas the previous, it's very rare. A few people claim to have it, or several, and it's very fuzzy and diaphanous. It's not at all concrete. Okay, As a matter of fact, I mean, that's practically the nature of it. It's like, it's sort of a sense, a feeling that something is the way, a certain way. And let me give an example. So let's say there's two intuitives. They both have a website, and they both have written a book, and they both have a following, that people that are like disciples that say that they're very intuitive. They're very intuitive people. And these two intuitive people, they go, say they get married, and they're going to go look at buy a car. And they go and they look at a used car, and they're driving home, and the man, who's highly intuitive, he says, I have a bad feeling. I think it's a lemon, okay? I didn't trust the dealer. He is shady. I can feel, his vibes were like this. And the wife says, no, I completely the opposite. I think it's going to be a great car, and it's going to last for years and years. So the problem is, how do you solve that? How do you settle that? They're both celebrated intuitives, They both claim to be, 80% right all the time about whatever they predict, okay? Well, everybody knows these things. There's a guy named, I won't name names. There are people, and they predict things, and they say that they're 80% right, and then you follow up on it, and it doesn't happen. But then they have some excuse for why it doesn't happen, like, we wished it away. Or it's very, very fuzzy. Now, some people even feel that this intuitiveness, this fuzzy kind, is actually part of what makes people human, what makes us really real people. And so to imitate that, computer programmers feel that they have brilliantly come up with something called fuzzy logic. Makes a computer more like a person by having fuzzy logic. So you see, he's going in exactly the opposite direction that I'm talking about. Because what I say, an intuition is something everybody shares, everybody has. And it's absolutely clear, okay? It's not like, spooky. It's like 1 + 1 is 2. Now, it's not just that 1 + 1 is 2, because you can calculate that. I can take this one piece of paper, and I can take this one piece of paper, and I can then hold them up, and I can count them, and I get to 2. Okay, so I just proved that 1 and 1 together makes 2. It seems like I proved that. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, what about our certainty that 1 + 1 will be 2 tomorrow? And that 1 + 1 was 2 before the world was formed. Okay? How do you know that? You can't go back and look at the piece of paper. You can't time travel forward or back. So it's not by observation. It's not by, we don't know why we know. Okay? Now, I'm going to go over some of these intuitions. I'm going to give a very strange and unfinished account for them. I don't think you can explain these intuitions simply by it's an evolved way of organizing your experience. Okay? There's a guy that everybody's heard of named Noam Chomsky. And he is famous. When he was young at MIT, he came up with a theory to explain language. And he believed that language was too complicated to learn the way they used to think you learned it, just watch and imitate. Okay? And all languages share certain complexities, you see. So he believed that language was hardwired in the brain. Okay, there's the answer, problem solved. Of course, he doesn't point to the hard wires, and that's just a metaphor. So what kind of an explanation is that? What kind of a cause? A nominal cause. Okay? It's an occult, theoretical cause. He just names it, gave it a name. I mean, we can sort of get a picture of like something firing and something, you know, in the DNA. We can't point to it, can't find it. So now the problem with this is that how this could enable us to understand language if something was like embedded in our DNA and our brains were shaped a certain way. Because you still have to recognize, let's say that that's written in some kind of code, okay? It's encoded, language is encoded in your brain. Well, you have to be able to, on some level, read that code. So therefore, that's a kind of language, and therefore, he hasn't explained language. He just has a language, a computer-like language in the brain to account for language. So it's sort of like aliens created people. Oh, that's how people got here. Another kind of people put us here. See, that's circular, kooky. That's like steam shovels made steam shovels. Okay? You know, there was a time where they used to think, to explain the human conscious feeling of awareness, that inside a person was a homunculus. Okay, it's like a little driver inside. Okay, so how do you explain how humans are human? Well, there's a little human inside. So this is sort of like that. So he has a kind of like a you know, a digital language in the DNA that explains language. Of course, it's a language too. Anyway, it's the same old thinking. Okay, coming up with something to explain something else, okay? A theoretical something to explain the observed and thing, and in this case, the observation that people are able to talk. Well, I'm going to show that we have actually a couple intuitions that we're born with, that are intuitions, that are not pieces of, you know, chromosomes. Okay, these are ways we're born expecting the world to be, and that we organize our world in terms of. And so I'm going to go over them. Now, where am I? Here. I think I'm on the wrong. Okay. When people are born, you see a child, a small child. The child is born looking for patterns, expecting patterns, okay? Expecting patterns, looking for patterns. And when it runs into some patterns, it recognizes them as patterns, okay? It doesn't just see it as random, okay? So, this is how a child is capable of inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is if something keeps happening in the past, it's likely to happen in the future, because the child is born expecting the world to have patterns, and therefore it recognizes that there's a pattern, and therefore it expects certain things to occur. That's induction. That's part of logic. So underlying inductive logic is an intuition that there are patterns, an expectation of patterns, and an ability to recognize patterns because they expect them. It's like an intuition. Things have patterns. Okay, another thing, and we'll get to the language in a moment. Expect consistency. Child is born, it sees, you know, a window's on that side of the room, and it expects that later the window will still be on that side of the room. The child expects things to be consistent, to not be contradictory. Okay, this enables us to use logic, deductive reasoning, where we don't like and we find contradiction to be a sign of something being untrue. Okay, police use that all the time. They question a person for a long time, and they're looking for them to contradict themselves, because if they contradict themselves, somewhere in there they're lying. Okay, so contradiction is a sign of something being false, and that's how we're able to have deductive logic. Okay, because we have this intuition that things should be consistent. Now, we also have an intuition that there are that everything has a cause. See, we can't. All we observe in the world is correlations, okay? But we have an intuition that some of these things are the cause, okay? I'm sorry that I started with the thing of language and I'm talking about all these other intuitions. It's kind of a mistake, but I could redo this or I could just do this and just keep going because I want to get these talks done. All right, so sorry. Geez, I had that written down here. Oh, yeah. Okay. Now, okay, now here's the one that has to do with language. This could have explained language almost entirely by itself. It's not hardwired in your brain. It doesn't even have any meaning, okay? It's words. That's not an explanation, okay? This is an explanation. We have an intuition that some things signify something else. That doesn't mean there's any actual physical relationship between two things. We just are born with the intuition of understanding and looking for and expecting and recognizing symbols. This is the sign, and this is what it is, what it denotes. Okay. Now, I want to show how the mind is able to do this in an example. When I was working a couple of years ago, I would go to the library, local library, often. The signs on the street for the library were very, very inadequate. In fact, they didn't even say library. They had crooked arrows. They were in the wrong place. They were tiny. There's a place where there's a lot of traffic. They were a block, antecedent of where the library turn was. It didn't make any sense. I just got lost every time. I had moved back to South Carolina only a couple of years earlier, and this going to the library was really a problem for me. I'm not good with directions anyway. I don't think philosophers usually are. So I was looking for some kind of indication, some kind of landmark that I could remember so that I could remember where to turn. So I noticed there was this big, bright green sign for a restaurant called Martini. And it was neon, and it was like lime green. You couldn't miss it. Martini. It was pretty quite large, and it was right at the turn. And you could see from either direction. So I said, well, that'll be my landmark when I turn at Martini. So each time I went to the library after that, I never had any problem. After a while, the sign stopped saying to me, Martini. And it started saying to me, not literally, but figuratively, it started saying, and library. That's what it indicated. That's what it was a sign for, the turn for the library. So that green sign that had those abstract letters on it came to signify the library. And this is how language is created. We have the ability, we are born looking for signs, expecting signs, and when we see signs that a community agrees upon, we're able to recognize them and remember them and share them with others, and this is the basis of language. Now, I have others that have to do with mathematics, but I think I've made the point, I hope, that something that you're born with that is psychogenic, that is part of your psyche, okay, is the basis that enables us to do all these rational things, like use induction, which is to expect the future to be like the past, is based on our intuition about patterns. And our ability to see that if all boys have wings and Johnny is a boy, then Johnny has wings, because we're looking for things to be consistent if they're true, okay? So consistency is another thing like patterns that we're looking for. Our understanding of change is completely organized by our expectation of causation. That something is the cause, all right? So we're born looking for the cause of things. Even a tiny child, if they hear a big bang, they'll look around to see where the bang came from, because that's how they'll understand the bang, in terms of it had a cause. Now, that's something you can't really teach. You just have to sort of be born with it. So these intuitions have to be sort of, they're necessary, that they're before even we can have these more developed perceptual schemas like gravity and stuff, okay? You have to be able to be, some of these just are born innate expectation of something or understanding of something before it exists. Now, I feel that I can't explain that simply in terms of something more basic than them. And they don't fit into my evolution of perceptual schemas. So I've struggled to account for them in a way that's consistent with my theory. But and I'll get to what I think. But I'm going to now mention a few other things that are even more difficult to explain. Okay, and these, okay. There are some things, this goes back to Plato. Plato was onto something with his theory of forms, because he saw that certain things could not be explained unless you already recognized it, okay? So one of those is humor, okay? If somebody doesn't have a sense of humor, you're not going to be able to talk them into getting the joke, okay? We recognize certain things as funny, and we laugh. And little teeny children, babies, see things as funny. Okay, so that's mysterious. That can't be learned from, like, smack your hand, you didn't laugh. Now laugh. You just can't do it that way. It's not a behaviorist thing. It's an actual sense of humor. It sounds funny, but it's very philosophically difficult to explain. Another one, besides humor, is our sense of justice, fairness, okay? Another one is love. How do you explain love, okay? Love isn't just behavior. Love isn't sex. Love is something that people spend their lives trying to even define, let alone explain. Another's courage, okay? It's something people have. When somebody has it, we recognize it as courage. Let me give you an example. Let's say a group of people are standing outside a building, and it's on fire. And inside there's crying. There's a little child in there, and it's in the smoke. And one of the people, in the crowd, he tears off his coat, and he goes bursting through the flaming door, and he's in there for a while, and you hear all this coughing, and you hear the child and boards falling, and then he comes out carrying the child. Now, if you had no idea what courage was, okay, you would just say, okay, well, that a man went in a building and he returned with a child. That's what happened. Those are the facts. But instead, we organize that experience through our innate understanding of what courage is. Now, courage was huge for Plato, okay? As was also beauty. Beauty. Okay, in the materialistic time, we think that, there isn't any. It's just cultural, and that nobody, most people really don't think that's beautiful. Well, in the times of the Greeks, they absolutely believed in real beauty. That's what their statues were about. And that's what Plato was reaching for, too. And then ultimately, for Plato, there was the good. Now, I won't get into this, but Christians are very good at making an argument that you cannot explain good unless you understand what good is. You can't just say, well, it's not the bad, because that shows that you know what bad is, which means you have some sense of what good is. Okay, so even if people disagree on what acts are good, they all get what it means to be good. Okay, what is the good? Now, Plato was searching for the ultimate good, the good. And that's where we get our idea of God, by the way, through Plato anyway. So we could call these intuitions too. Now, I'm going to point out some intuitions, things that we all know, we're born knowing. They're the basis of our intelligence. We don't really learn them. We understand, we learn because we're born with these, okay? And I'm going to show that in modern times, people have been trained. There's been a great attempt in the last century to break people of their intuitions, okay? To actually go, when you have your intuition in play, until your intuition just breaks, and then you lose the intuition. And you feel, because society is telling you you're now going beyond your limitations, you feel very smart about it. So you take all these time travel movies, okay? Oh, everybody kind of thinks this, everybody. Lots and lots of people, especially young people, believe that time travel is possible. Einstein saw that time travel is possible. So it's intuitive that time goes forward. You're born with that understanding. The idea that we've been trained that it can do the opposite is breaking it, kind of like a circuit in our intelligence, okay? It's what intelligence is about time is based on, that intuition about time, okay? So, for instance, how could time go backward? Go back compared to what, okay? So, well, Einstein and people since him have come up with this idea that time is kind of like a fabric, kind of like a stuff, kind of like silly putty or, Play-Doh. Well, that's highly unintuitive. No intelligent person would think that time is like a Play-Doh. And they talk about the fabric of space-time. There's no such thing. All this is shattering your intuitions, your normal, healthy way you think. Also, people are taught that beauty is not real, that it's just relative, that it's just subjective. Actually, it doesn't feel that way when we go and see certain works of art, okay, from the past. If you tell yourself, people who say it's ugly, they're lying. They're lying. And they'll often go into a museum and say something that's ugly is beautiful, because they're breaking people of their intuition about beauty. And it's tragic. And it leads even to health consequences where, obesity and stuff, and you're supposed to, stop, body shaming and everything. It's all just relative. And the idea that there is objective truth. You're born understanding that there's objective truth. That's the whole purpose of life, is to look for the truth. But you're broke, there's no objective truth. Whose truth? Whose truth? So this is the damaging of people, breaking people. Science is so damaged by this that I can't say for sure, but it seems it may be one of the reasons that in the United States, technology is actually in decline. We can't at this time put a human being into low space orbit. We have to go to Kazakhstan and have the Russians fly us person to the space station because we have forgotten how. The best jet that we've just made, the newest one, the F-35, can't go for long stretches in past the speed of sound. And so, what is that called? Supersonic. Okay, it can't maintain supersonic flight. They just revealed this. There's actually a decline, falling apart. And I think it has to do with this. Now, why are these intuitions very important? I'm going to try to explain, and I'm going to do the best I can. Maybe I'll have to redo this whole talk. But a lot of times I don't do that. I just let them ride because I've got other stuff to do. Functionalism is the prevailing theory of mind that's supposed to account for like what things are fundamentally in metaphysics, in philosophy. And it's the belief that we human beings are really just machines. We're like computers, but we're, organic material, but we're like organic computers. We just function like a hard drive that evolved, okay? And it sounds good. We're kind of like, garbage in, garbage out. I mean, we're kind of like an ATM machine, Our perceptions are like stuff going in, and then, stuff comes back out, like an ATM machine. You put in your card, and then you get, out some cash. Or a thermostat has been used as a metaphor for people. We're like that. We react to temperature like a thermostat. And that eventually we'll be able to have artificial consciousness because there really isn't any consciousness. It's just looks like it. It's just the cognitive behavior. If we can imitate the cognitive behavior of people, that is what a person is. And we can just do that with computers. We can make a computer person. And here's why that's impossible. And this is pretty well explained actually in my book. So if I don't get it across, it's not going to be a big problem. The computer is blind and completely stupid. And it doesn't see what it's doing. And it doesn't see anything. And when I say see, I don't mean with the eyeballs. I mean look within, introspect, and see. Oh, okay. So for instance, the intuitions are not known to a computer. Nor can they ever be recognized, because the intuitions are all something that when you introspect, you recognize on your own. Let me give an example. Like about cause. That everything has a cause. All we got to do, any human being can stop, reflect upon that, and then come and say, yeah, that's how it appears. It does feel like that. Or that where there are patterns by definition, if it's a pattern, it's going to be extended into the future if it's over time, a pattern. Or even, and that patterning is what makes language possible. So all the stuff that the computer programmer is programming into the computer is based on intuitions that he can't give to the computer. All right? I'm not even going to say anything more about that, but enough. They're going to understand that at some point. He's simply making the computer, through algorithms, behave as if it knows these intuitions, because the algorithms are written based on the intuitions that the programmer has. The computer doesn't have them and never can, because they're not that kind of thing. They're not logical. They're not based on algorithms. They're the basis of algorithms. All right, and now one other thing I want to say, I want to slip it in, may not be the right, that's what the problem with this talk. I should have had bullet points, but, I'm not that, this isn't really on my mind all the time, believe it or not. Used to be, but now I'm just trying to get it out. I want to explain something to people because it has to do with intuitions, and it has to do with the breaking of the intuitions, and it has to do with people becoming wildly stupid while feeling themselves to be incredibly smart. It's a little like the time travel thing, and the wormholes and all that. There's this idea about dimensions. I hear it all the time. It's a little, in the New Age stuff, that's kind of equivalent with energy. There was an energy there, an energy field, and that's very meaningful, and nobody knows what they're talking about. Energy is a whole subject I'd go into with a whole talk by itself, but I won't. But dimensions, I will briefly here. Let me explain what dimensions really are first, and then explain what they've become in the imagination of the unbelievably person who has their intuitions are completely shattered. If you look up the root of the word dimension, a dimension is a measure. Okay, like what are the dimensions of the bedroom? It's 10 feet by 12 feet. All right. Those are dimensions. It's the width and the depth of a room, okay? Now here's a physical object, okay? Now let me go over 3 measures, all right? We can measure just the height, all right? That's one measure of it. One dimension of this box is its height, okay? And let's say that's only 5 inches, okay? And then there's the width there. Let's call it the width. And that's 2 inches, okay? And that's a second dimension, see? That's a second thing we can measure, right? And then we can measure the, maybe I should call it depth and that width. Okay, here's a measure, that's a dimension. Now that's a third measure, okay? Now with those 3 measurements, 1, 2, 3, 3 dimensions of this box, I'm able to tell all kinds of things about the box through geometry. I can say how much area is in it, how much water it would hold, and I can say, where is the center of the front, and all kinds of things, okay? I know a lot about this box if I know it's a cube. And we sometimes say this is 3-dimensional, okay, because it has 3 measures. Whereas, this piece of paper, for the most part, it only has 2 measures. So it's kind of 2-dimensional, but it's not, okay, but not really. It's just like, right. Now, somewhere along the way, people knew this forever. The Greeks knew this, everybody knew this. I can't say the date or the event, but it was in the 1800s. Dimensions became woo-woo, okay? So you could move from one woo-woo to another woo-woo, and you could like interdimensional, and like we could like transcend to another dimension. And like time is a dimension. Well, yeah, time is something you can measure too. I can also measure how long this talk is. And that's interesting. And from the time I made this box to the time I threw it in the fireplace, I could, it existed for, 3 hours. But that became the 4th dimension. All right? This is wildly unintelligent. Okay? It is a digression. I don't know if somebody did this to people, if it's like some kind of plot, or there's some stupid there's mad scientists, but maybe there's mad social scientists. Maybe they did this to us. I don't know. But this is very, very unintelligent. The idea, you talk about UFOs, you can hardly talk about them before they're talking about, they may be time travelers, or they come from another dimension, This is very stupid. And it's because it's the loss of our natural intuitions. Anybody who has natural intuitions could explain what I just did, okay? You don't have to be a big genius. Well, I think I did a pretty sorry-ass job with this talk, but I got done, and I'm going to put it online, and maybe someday I'll redo it, but that's my talk on intuitions. Oh no, I thought of something. I had to say, where did the intuitions come from? How do we account for the intuitions? If we can't account for them in terms of something simpler than them, they are basic, where do they come from? Okay, just quickly. I said the other day that my original explaining that the world is just originally there's perception. I realized at some point that the necessary condition for there to be perception is that there be intelligence. Okay, I don't mean an intelligence. Okay, I mean intelligence. All right, and I don't mean an intelligent being. I just mean intelligence. And I said that also that Meher Baba is saying that the purpose of life is to attain self-knowledge, okay, which is all there is to know by this this sort of infinite intelligence, all right? It's its nature. It's explained by its nature. So it occurred to me that all of these intuitions are the nature of intelligence. That intelligence recognizes beauty. That intelligence recognizes when a joke is funny. If there ever was a joke that came along that was funny. That intelligence can see also simpatico, sadness, can have empathy. That the intelligence recognizes courage. Or it has the capacity to have courage. Okay, love. Okay, love is in the nature of intelligence. Okay, sounds strange, but that's what I think at this point. And I'm always growing and I'm always changing what I think. Okay, we'll see you next time. Next time will be our final talk number 11, and then I'm going to be turning my attention to other things that I'm not going to be talking about at this time. All right, thank you very much. See you next week.